If you guys want to win your fantasy hockey leagues this season, you need to be drafting in a tiers format. It gives you the best understanding of player value across a wide spectrum, which is why today I'm going to be bringing you guys our top 20 wingers in tiers. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Let's get right into the video. It's so good to be back. I wanted to shout out our brand new website, fantasypuck.net, guys. Everything you need in terms of fantasy hockey content will be available here. If you head on over to the content tab, you can get notifications when videos are released. If you come over to FPPL and you're interested in joining FPPL, be sure to check that out as well too. I know a lot of you guys were interested in joining last year and you weren't able to get in. So if you're interested in playing a very competitive, interactive fantasy hockey league, be sure to do that. And check that out in the description down below or on our website at fantasypuck.net, where you will have access to, a preview potentially of some of our projections, as well as other premium fantasy hockey content available to you if you want to sign up via our Patreon and support us. We will have projections, draft analysis, tools like our trade analyzer, our fantasy schedule, our player cards, and exclusive Discord access and titles as well. So be sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. We spent a ton of time building this out over the course of the summer. Hopefully you guys enjoy, so definitely check that out. Now let's get right into the tier list, guys. So as we get deeper and deeper into these tiers, there's always going to be some differentiation between the tier above and below, whether it's peripherals or ceiling or point production or just injury concerns. Just to keep on track with that, I'm going to do my best to kind of differentiate the tiers for you guys at the end. But that being said, let's kick things off. Let's get our S tier out of the way. We have Nikita Kucherov, David Pastrnak, Mikko Rantanen, Matthew Tkachuk, and Brady Tkachuk. Now let's start things off with Nikita Kucherov. We're going to take a look at how he was last season. I was admittedly very wrong about Kuch last year. I was very hesitant of him playing the 82 game season. I was a little bit kind of concerned whether or not he was actually going to remain healthy, because over the course of his career, as you can see, he hasn't been a healthy player by any means. And really the most outstanding thing from Kucherov this year is, you can say, the 100 assists. Like, what a milestone for the guy. But I'm more shocked about the fact that he hit 44 goals on the year for a total of 144 points. Again, guys, the categories that we want to focus on are goals, assists, power play points, shots, hits, and blocks. That's what we're going to be primarily basing these tiers off of. And Kuch is one of the best in terms of both, pretty much all those categories, except I'd say maybe the peripherals, like the hits and blocks, which we'll touch on in a second. But he is in a category of his own when it comes to power play points. He's an absolute stud on the power play. The entire power play runs through this guy. 53 power play points on the year with 306 shots. His shot volume went absolutely crazy last year. He also shot a total of 14%, which is right on par with his career average. Hits and blocks are never going to be there, unfortunately, for Kuch. That's just not the type of player he is. But we really do not care when he's putting up 144 points on the year. But he will be a top 5 pick this year, and I highly recommend, if you can get to him, to do that. Let's go back and take a look at the rest of our S tier. David Pastrnak in the S tier, and it's just well deserved at this point. He seems to be an absolute lock for 40 goals. If he plays a full 82 season, he's in that 50 to 60 range. As you can see, 61 last year with a total of 113 points, and then another year of 110 point plus for Pasta. Great season out of him. Almost hit the 50 goal mark, but 63 assists is fantastic. If you take a look at his power play numbers, pretty underwhelming, I would say, honestly, for Pasta. But Boston's power play is really kind of died off lately. But a total of 35 is very solid and good amongst most forwards. Can't complain about that, but nowhere near what you would see out of like a Kucherov, for example. The biggest thing with Pasta is his shot volume, 382 shots, and then his hit volume is actually pretty solid as well too. He'll get you in that 70 to 90 range even. The blocks probably nowhere near anything significant, but again, great year for Pasta, deservingly of the S tier for him. An insane shot volume, has a chance to lead lead the league in shots every single year. Another player that's going to go in the first round this year is Mikko Rantanen, and he is the definition of a safe pick in the first round. 42 goals last year with 62 assists for 104 points. He's pretty much a lock now for 100 plus points every single season. He came down a little bit in terms of his shot volume and his goal totals. As you can see, he went from 306 to 271. As long as he's in that 271 plus range, I love him. He's just so solid across the board in terms of his production, and an absolute stud on the power play as well too. 40 power play points for Mikko last year. Just so safe, plays always very consistently, plays games as well too. He's always in that 80 plus game played total, which is obviously something that you want in when you're taking a first round player. You want him to play as much as possible. And then the hits and blocks are unfortunately never going to be there. 49 blocks is pretty good for a forward, anywhere in that 40 plus range, but he won't get you a ton of hits. A very solid, very safe player in the first round and deserving to be in the S tier. Matthew Tkachuk is going to find his way back into the S tier. I promise you guys, he's just an absolute lock for over 100 points every single year going forward. From this point on, he did have a little bit of drop in terms of his goal scoring, and his shot total was pretty decent, but as you can see, his shooting percentage was well below his career average of 12.6. He's in that 9 range, so a little bit more luck for Matthew Tkachuk, and he will get himself back into that 100 plus point range. Again, one of the most durable players in the league as well. He's missed 3 total games over the course of the last 3 years. You want these kinds of players, and the biggest thing why I'm going to throw Matthew Tkachuk in the S tier going into next season was the fact that he pretty much doubled his hit total from last year, up to 152 hits. The blocks will never be there, unfortunately, for Tkachuk, but now that he's hitting a lot back to where he normally was when he was in his early days in Calgary, I absolutely love the guy. I think he's such a safe pick. I think he should get back to that 40 goal range next season, and he's a lock for 60 assists every single year, and it seems to be over 100 points. Last year was an outlier, I promise you. The hits will continue, the shot volume will continue. He's going to be an absolute stud this season, and that's why he's in my S tier. Finally, rounding out our S tier list is Brady Tkachuk, and the reason why I'm going to throw him into the S tier list, I was considering putting him into A, but after looking at his stats, I simply have to put him in the S tier. The fact that he gets you 35 goals every single year seems to be just so good in terms of that production. I know he dropped off a little bit. He's down to 74 points last year from his 83 the year prior, but the fact and the sole reason why he's in S tier is that he can get you 35 goals and also potentially lead the NHL in shots and hits simultaneously. This guy's an absolute unicorn. He's a top 5 player in bangers leagues, could be a top 2 player in bangers leagues for how much he gives you in terms of the hit volume, in terms of the shot volume, in terms of the PIMs. If you count that in your league, again, we're not counting that on this list, but the fact that he'll get you 35 plus goals, 350 plus shots, and then 290, close to 300 hits last season is just absurd. Also one of the most durable players in fantasy hockey alongside his brother Matthew. No coincidence there, I'm sure. The biggest thing with me is just the power play points for Brady. Like 22 on the year is kind of meh. Hopefully Ottawa gets back on track, but I think Brady will get back towards that point per game range. He's in the S tier for me. All right, let's move on to our A tier. We're going to throw Artemi Panarin, Kirill Kaprizov, Filip Forsberg, William Nylander, Jason Robertson, and Kyle Connor. Now, here's the biggest thing that I see from the drop off from S to A tier is there is a couple more question marks in terms of consistency, in terms of repeating the last season, and in terms of health across some of these players. Let's get into it. Starting us off, we have Artemi Panarin. And the reason why that I decided to throw him into the A tier versus going into the S tier, I know he's going in some first rounds right now across mock drafts, and who can blame him after the year that he had last year? 49 goals, 71 assists, 120 points with 44 power play points on top of that, and over 300 shots. The hits and blocks will never be there for Panarin, but that's fine when he gets you 120 points. Now, Bremen has always been a consistent 90, 95 point player. As you can see, it's dating back to even 2019, where he's hit this range of just being a consistent 90 plus point player. And so for me, the biggest concern with Bremen is, can he repeat the season that he had last year, specifically those 49 goals and that 300 plus shot total, when you typically see him down in the 200 range. The fact that he's having a career year in his early 30s as he should be potentially declining, it's really unlikely that Panarin is going to repeat the season that he had last year. And I like him in that 90, 95 point range like he's been consistently over the course of his career. I'm very hesitant about his shot total. I'm very hesitant about that goal total as well, but he's an absolute stud on the power play. He's a lock for pretty much 60 plus assists, 65, 70 assists every single year. Again, like he could be a 100-point player. I wouldn't be surprised if he is, but there is a little bit of hesitation there on my end. Moving on to Krill the Thrill Kaprizov. And looking at his stats from last year, really the reason why he's in A tier is simply because the fact that health has been a concern over the past 2 seasons now, guys. Even in a year where he played 75 games, 46 goals, 50 assists for 96 points, 277 shots, and then look at those power play totals with 41 on the year. 55 hits isn't bad as well. It's not a lot. It's nothing to get excited about. And then 40 blocks. And the big thing for me, why Kaprizov is an A tier and not an S tier, isn't because of his ceiling, isn't because of his production, but it is a slight concern with his injury history. He seems to be a lock for 40 goals every single year. I think it's very possible he can hit that 110, 115 point range if he can stay healthy over the course of the season, and that will be his biggest factor. If he does stay healthy, he could potentially be a top 10 player. The ceiling is definitely there for Kaprizov. It's just really the injury concerns that forced me to put him into the A tier. Still a fantastic pick this season. Up next, Mr. Filip Forsberg. He's going to remain in the A tier. We absolutely loved him last season. He was a league winner by far, just based off the fact you could get him into like round 9 some drafts last year. He was an absolute gem that we highlighted for you guys last year, so hopefully you listened and took Filip Forsberg. Fantastic year from him. 48 goals, 46 assists, 94 points on the season with a total of 32 power play points on the year for Filip Forsberg. 347 shots, and then the big 140 hit total on top of all of that with 44 blocks. But he does have some injury concern to him. He's missed double-digit games pretty much over the past 3 years. It really concerns me because of the fact that, you know, there isn't any type of consistency in terms of his games played, like even going back to like 2016, 2017. And I know the COVID years are in here as well too, so keep that in mind. But again, like you're not seeing any games over 70 even. Like rarely does he ever hit 82, and that's a big red flag for me with this guy. So I can't put him any higher. I was being generous. I felt like putting him into A tier even because he had such a good season last year, and I want to see him continue. And he's such an absolute stud in bangers leagues too, because he's getting you 140 hits on top of a 90 plus point production and almost 50 goals with 350 shots. So again, you really have to be cautious with him going forward, given the fact that he's so injury prone at this point. And there's now other shooters in Nashville like Jonathan Marchand, Steven Stamkos. They're all seemingly right-handed shots as well. So I'm very hesitant as to how that's going to play out for Nashville going into next season. He still should be around a point a game regardless. I'm just very hesitant that he's going to play a full season next year. Seemingly opposite to Filip Forsberg, we have William Nylander, who is consistently one of the healthiest players in the National Hockey League over the last 3 seasons. He's only missed 1 game. He seems to be a lock for 40 goals every single year. And now he's getting you a boatload of shots, hitting over that 300 plus mark. And then the peripherals aren't anything to really get excited about in terms of his hits and his blocks. We know Willie, he's not that kind of player. But reaching 35 power play points as well last season. Willie's just a very, very safe pick, and I love him in that like mid to late second round even. I'm probably taking him more often than I'm taking Mitch Marner off the board first, just because of his floor at this point. Will get you 40 goals and a boatload of shots. Really, really love this guy. He's a very, very safe pick. He's a great late second round pick, like I said, potentially even in the 3rd round. But he seems to be going really, really high in drafts right now, which I'm not loving because I want to be able to get to him just because of how safe of a player he is. Some people are saying potentially this could be his ceiling, but as you can see, he's gotten better every single year. I expect him to be in that 90-95 point range, and with another 40 goal season and 300 shots. Moving on to Jason Robertson, and we'll see now with him and Kyle Connor, just seemingly both of their ceilings have started to just come down ever so slightly. I know he had the 109 point season with 46 goals. I think Robertson can get back to being that 40 goal scorer. But again, it's very possible that 63 assists was just a little bit of an outlier. And a pretty safe pick in terms of a floor. If he gets you 30, 35 goals and around 80 points. But the biggest concern with me for Jason Robertson was the fact that we saw such a drop off from last year in terms of his shot volume. As you can see, 231 shots, very reminiscent of the year in 2021-22 where he had 220. And he doesn't, like, his hit total was pretty good last year at 76. His block total is pretty good at 31. Nothing to get excited about. But in order for Jason Robertson to really be in the conversation with the rest of the players on this list, is he needs his ceiling to go back up to that 100+ point mark. I think he could be anywhere in the 90 to 95 point range. But you got to remember why Johnson is seemingly moving up the lineup more and more consistently now, and that could potentially take away a little bit from J-Rob's shot volume at the very, very least, not to mention his goal scoring totals. So I'm a little bit hesitant now with Jason Robertson just given his ceiling, but he does have a very, very solid floor. And then, like I said, Kyle Connor, again, a little bit of an off year last year. He was injured. He got back to around a point a game, 35 goals. I think he should be a lock for 40 if he stays healthy. He almost seemingly does it every single year with a decent shot volume anywhere over 270. And the same thing with the peripherals. I wouldn't be concerned about last year. He's a very, very safe player in terms of his games played total, like very, very durable. As you can see here, 71 games, that was the league lead. 56. He's missed one game over that 4-year span, which was in 21-22. So he's very, very safe as a player. And he gets you, like I said, around that 35-40 goal mark. So he should be good for next season. All right, going into our beats here, Mitch Marner is going to start us off. And then we have Sam Reinhart. And then we have Zach Hyman. We're going to throw Jake Guentzel in there, and then we're going to round things out with Clayton Keller and Jesper Bratt. You know what? I'm actually going to go ahead and throw Mitch Marner into the A tier now that I think about it, and I'll explain why in a second here. If you look at his stats, Mitch Marner has consistently been a 95+ point player over the past 2 seasons, even with a slight dip in terms of games played in that 2021-22 season, well over a point per game. The reason why I decided to move Mitch from B tier back into A tier is just the fact that I think he's going to get back to where he was the season prior, and he's seemingly falling in drafts. He will get back to 95+ points. He will get back to 30 goals on the year. This shot volume is really the only thing where I could make a consideration why we would put him into the B tier over a guy like Kyle Connor at the A tier, but I think he belongs at the end. If Austin Matthews continues to succeed at the rate that he is, that Mitch Marner will also continue to succeed, and he will definitely be threatening that 100-point total. And who doesn't want a 100-point player on their team? But let's go back to our tier list. So let's look at Sam Reinhart, because he's in a very, very interesting case if you look at his career totals, which we are going to right now. Last year, absolutely lights out. 57 goals on the year, 37 assists for 94 points. And then those power play totals of 34 for Reinhart. Really, really good stuff there. 233 shots along with 77 hits and 66 blocks. Good, really solid block total out of Reinhart. That's something that actually surprised me. But yeah, also like dual eligible. He's center right wing in most leagues. But the biggest concern with Reinhart is, look right here, guys. I said it last year with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I'm saying it again this year with Sam Reinhart. This guy basically doubled his goal total in 1 year and doubled his shooting percentage. I think he's going to be solid again in Florida. I don't think he's hitting anywhere close to this goal total again. So I'm looking at him as a player in that like 80-ish point range. And that's just not a high enough ceiling for me to justify putting him in the A tier with some of those other players, or at least players that have a similar kind of ceiling that Reinhart does, but then have an elite shot volume on top of that, guys like Kyle Connor. That shooting percentage is a glaring red flag to me, guys, and I highly recommend that you are cautious about Sam Reinhart. Kind of a similar story to Zach Hyman. Now looking at it, I probably probably would bump him above Sam Reinhart simply because of the fact that he's playing with Connor McDavid. So let's go ahead and let's do that right now. Actually, we're going to throw him right above Sam Reinhart to start things off in the B tier. Now, Hyman had a really, really good season, as most people could tell. 54 goals on the year with 23 assists, 77 points, 290 shots. The power play total is really glaring to me, like only 20 on the power play. And then 87 hits is good, along with 37 blocks. That's solid for a forward as well. But again, guys, very similar to Hyman, the shooting percentage really kind of jumped a little bit. 5% is a significant increase, believe it or not, when it comes to shooting percentages. So I expect Hyman to be very similar to his totals from last year, where 36. I don't know if his assist total is going to be that high, which is really the biggest thing that I'm worried about. Like, as you can see, over the course of his career, he's only had over 25 assists one time. If McDavid's going off, then chances are Hyman's going off, right? Because he's the one tapping in all those goals. But again, I am slightly hesitant with that goal total. I wouldn't be surprised if he nets 40, just so we're clear. But again, that assist total is going to bring his total points down. I love the shot volume on the guy. I think he's a very solid pick this year. But again, I think he's more of a floor player than he would be a ceiling player, like I said, with some of those people in the A tier. I would much rather take a guy who could potentially hit, in that 95 point range with an 80 point floor, and the fact that 54 goals for Zach Hyman seems absurd. Up next, we have Jake Guentzel of the Tampa Bay Lightning. I know he's still in his Carolina uniform there. It hasn't been updated in terms of like headshots yet, so apologies on that one, guys. But let's take a look at his stats from last year and let me explain why I have him in the B tier. So in between Pittsburgh and Carolina last season, he finished with 30 goals, 47 assists, 77 points. I'm a little bit hesitant of him going on to Tampa. I know people are super excited about it. I think it'll overall help their lineup. I think there will be an adjustment period. You got to remember that Steven Stamkos on that top power play unit was a right-handed shot on the left-hand side. Jake Guentzel is a left-handed shot and probably won't have the same impact. And I'm very curious to see how Tampa deploys him on the power play, because chances are things might just honestly run through Cooch and Point on the other side of the ice, and Guentzel might get left out a bunch on the power play, which is something I'm kind of worried about, simply because he doesn't have that one-timer capability for Cooch to go cross ice to him. He's only hit 40 goals once. His ceiling seems to be around the point of game marks, just sometimes slightly over. But for Guentzel, for a guy that is seemingly going to be a 40 goal scorer potentially next year, I would love to see him get some shot totals up. And then the peripherals, again, just aren't anything crazy. So a lot of question marks for me for Guentzel. I think he will find success next year. I just don't think it's going to be, to the extent some people think. But he should be a solid 80, 85 point player if he can stay healthy and play a full 82. I've priced that into his range. That's wwhy he's in the B tier. Clayton Keller and Jesper Bratt are very, very similar players. If we take a look at Clayton Keller here, 82 games this season before, 37 goals, 49 assists, and 86 points. Again, a solid campaign this year. To me, he needs to hit another ceiling for him to move up a tier. He needs to get that shot total up to like that 250 range. Yeah, he needs to be over a point a game player. He's primarily a playmaker. He's a very, very good one. But again, those peripheral stats are just nothing crazy. If we go ahead and take a look at him, 82 games the past two seasons, around that 30 goal mark, around that like 75 plus range in terms of points. 83 last year was very good for Bratt. And his shot total actually was pretty solid. So I would give the edge to Bratt, honestly. I might move him up over Keller. If Jack Hughes can play a full season, fingers crossed, Jesper Bratt could absolutely go off, in my opinion. He's still young enough. He's still talented enough. I'm just going to bump him above Keller again. I think Guentzel has the capability of scoring more goals and should sit in roughly the same range in terms of peripherals. Bratt could honestly move up the B tier pretty significantly this year, like I said, if Jack Hughes stays healthy. But then rounding out our C tier guys, we are going to start with Andrei Svechnikov, Timo Meier, and then finishing up our list, we have Adrien Kempe. And there's one thing across all of these players that you can probably tell. They all seemingly have good peripherals. So let's deep dive a little bit. Just remember, the guys, that he's still only 24, okay? And normally I would be a lot more hyped about him. I understand that the injury history is now a major concern, just coming off of an MCL surgery. But he did play the full season without any bangs or bruises after that held him out for a significant amount of time. So fingers crossed he can put together a solid season, always seemingly around a point a game mark. The biggest thing with Svech is the peripherals and what his ceiling could potentially be if he does stay healthy. 144 shots in 59 games with 141 hits. Again, these could be easily like 250 in both categories. And we're back on him again this year because of that. Carolina is thinning out a little bit. We'll see how they are overall as a team, but Svech will consistently see top 6 minutes. He's going to get on the power play. Again, those power play totals are not great, but he does have the possibility of scoring 30 goals, getting 250 shots, getting 220 hits, and being a top 20 winger, in my opinion, next year if he can stay healthy. And I'm back on it. So there's a reason why he's on this list. I think he can get back to staying healthy and being a top 20 winger. That's why he's here. Let's go ahead and take a look at our boy Timo Meier. I almost ranked him higher, guys. I won't lie to you. I almost ranked him higher. But because of how abysmal last season was, like, that is the absolute floor for me. 78 games was the year before where he had 66 points. We're like, okay, he's adapting. He scored 40. He had 327 shots. Like, this is great. Next year, 69 total games played, 52 points. 30 goals is his floor, right? Like, let's keep that in mind. And he still had a very high shot total for only 70 games played at 207, 111 hits, 154 hits the year before. Again, I expect him to be in that range. I think he's going to score his way back. I think Timo Meier is going to be a top 40 fantasy player this year. I think if he plays alongside Jack Hughes, it's going to completely unlock him. I think the coaching change really helped him. He finally started playing on his correct wing that he's been on in San Jose this entire time. I think he's going to go absolutely bananas this year. I'm really excited. I'm looking for him everywhere I can in drafts. I really love him this year. The shot volume, he's this year's Filip Forsberg. Point blank, that's how I put it. I don't think he can hit 90 points. Like, his ceiling just isn't there. The capability of him scoring 40, having 300 plus shots and 140, 150 hits makes him so valuable as a fantasy asset that it's hard for me to pass him up. Same thing with Svech, right? Like, just the peripherals, just the fact that he could be a point-a-game player. He just needs to put it together for a season. And I think Timo Meier will honestly bounce back. He's a huge bounce-back candidate for me this year. And then finishing out our list, guys, is Adrien Kempe. He had a solid season last year. As you can see, 75 points in 77 games to 28 goals. The reason why I ranked him below Timo Meier and below Andrei Svechnikov is the fact that he just needs to show me he's this player again. Up until this point, like, I believed his, like, the 67 points was his ceiling. He's still young. He's a very, very good Bangers League player. 250 shots consistently, 110 plus hits consistently, 30 blocks consistently, 30 goals consistently. This is a good player. And I think he's a lot safer than a Timo Meier and an Andrei Svechnikov, but I don't think he has the ceiling of those players, which is why he's at the bottom of the tier here. Again, I think a really, really solid floor, but if he can score 75 points again and have the same stat line, and you've got Timo Meier, who again puts up 75 points, the difference between Timo Meier and Adrien Kempe is the fact that Timo Meier will shoot 100 more shots, right? Like, he'll have 20 more hits. He will, you know, potentially have 40 goals. Kempe could do it, absolutely. As you can see, if you look at his shooting percentage, it's significantly lower than the past 2 seasons. But it's the fact that if all 3 of these players that I've listed in this tier seemingly have the most ideal season, Kempe, in my opinion, given the roster, given the opportunity, just doesn't have the ceiling as those other 2. Kempe's solid, don't get me wrong, I love him. I'm looking for him, honestly, in drafts a ton, I guess, again, because I believe that he could do it. It's just, in terms of ceiling, it's not there. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I apologize if this video was super long. I'm getting back into things. I'm rambling a little bit sometimes, but hopefully you enjoyed the format and everything. Again, be sure to check out our website, fantasypuck.net, for all your fantasy hockey content, all your fantasy hockey tools. Be sure to sign up for FPL if you haven't done that. I'm super excited for that this year. We've built out an actual ranking pyramid that you can see on the website. Be sure to check that out. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm super excited to be back into it, guys. Hopefully you are too. I will see you in the next video. Have yourselves a fantastic rest of the day.